Story time about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and trigger warning for this. My mom and dad got pregnant with me when they were only 16. They were both young and irresponsible. My mom wanted to keep me, but my dad didn't. My dad basically broke up with my mom and told her that if she wanted to have me, she would have to do it on her own. So my mom did. Luckily, my grandma helped her out a lot and she was able to stay in school. As a baby, my dad would visit me every now and then, but he wasn't really involved in my life as far as my mom says. Here's a little backstory on my dad. My dad grew up in a really strict family and he was expected to graduate and become a doctor. So that's pretty much exactly what he did. During the time that he was in college, he really didn't come see my mom or I, but of course my mom and him kept in contact. When my dad, or should I say husband, graduated from medical school, he finally got married. And of course this was hard for my mom because she thought eventually they would get back together. By the time my dad remarried, I was about 12 years old. I didn't have a relationship with him at the time and it didn't bother me. I was so busy with friends in school I never really thought about him. Not until I turned 14. This is when things started changing and I told my mom that I really wanted to talk to my dad. So he and I started talking on the phone and eventually he came to visit me. But things started changing when I turned 19. He actually ended up getting a divorce and he and I would spend more and more time together alone. Part 2 is story time about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and trigger warning for this. When I turned 19 is when my dad and I started spending more time together alone. Or should I say my husband? Keep in mind, I really didn't have a relationship during my teen years. We only spoke on the phone a few times and he would visit every now and then, but not a lot. When I turned 19, I was living in college and I was closer to my dad. So I decided to reach out to him and ask him if he wanted to have dinners every now and then, and he said yes. The first time we went out to dinner, we actually had a lot of fun, and it really didn't feel like I was hanging out with my dad. It was more like I was hanging out with a friend. We just didn't have that father-daughter dynamic. We would meet up almost every single weekend and our relationship was actually very friendly. We would make each other laugh and talk about everything. And this is when we realized that we had a lot in common. Eventually he asked me if I was dating anyone and I told him I wasn't. When I got home, I started realizing that I wasn't thinking about my dad like a dad. I was thinking about him like a man. So the next time I saw him, I decided to tell him that. And that's when he told me that he didn't see me like a daughter either. It took a lot of courage for me to tell him this. So that's when things started to really change between us. Every time we would hang out after that, it was more like a date. We started getting to know each other and he would hold my hand every now and then. And a few weeks later, we had our first kiss. Part 3 is up! Story time about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and trigger warning for this. After our first kiss, everything changed. We didn't think of each other as father-daughter. And of course, our relationship began to get more serious. And one thing we kept discussing was, should we tell our family or should we just keep it secret? So we kept it secret for almost a full year. I told my mom that I was dating someone, but I wouldn't tell her who it was. Also, a little side note, my mom and dad didn't have any contact between them at this time. My mom was actually married to someone else and they were very happy. But for me, it was getting to the point where I needed to tell somebody. Because yes, part of me felt that this was really wrong, but the other part of me felt that it was just right. I had never met anybody like him before. So I decided to tell my grandma, and she nearly had a heart attack. She called my mom right away and told her the truth. That's when my mom came over and we talked for a few hours. I explained to them everything and they still didn't agree with me. My mom called my dad and they got into an epic fight. I was totally expecting this, but it really hurt. My mom and grandma were totally against the relationship. That's when they told me that they would never speak to me again if I kept the relationship going. A few months later, we decided to get married privately. I didn't tell my mom. She actually found out through my best friend who was totally against our relationship as well. And she pretty much tells my mom everything I tell her. It's been 2 years since we got married and part of me still feels guilty and like I did something really wrong. But now it's getting even worse because I actually met someone who's my age and is not related to me. But I don't have the heart to break up with my husband/dad. I told my mom about this new guy and she really wants me to get a divorce. I feel like all along I was just looking for the love of a man because I didn't get that from my dad. Now that I'm seeing someone else, I'm realizing how wrong what I did was. But I don't want to break my dad/husband's heart. How can I fix this? What should I do?
Am I the asshole for not buying a drink for my friends? I was out with a few friends the other day and we went to a restaurant for dinner. One of my friends is Muslim and is very strict about everything. For example, once one of her coworkers was smoking in the break room and she asked her to do it somewhere else. My friends wanted drinks and I saw that she looked to the ground and grimaced. So when the waiter came, I only asked for a few glasses of water and nothing else. My friend then interjected and asked for beer and I stopped the waiter and told him no. Just water, please. Am I the asshole for not buying a drink for my friends? My friend asked for beer and I said no, actually just water. When he came back with the water, all of my friends piped up at me and started an argument about it. My friend who is Muslim, Fatima, was being silent but later told me she appreciated what I did. After dinner though, my friends left me with the bill and drove home. So, am I wrong? I should really add that these were my friends, not hers, and they met her once and asked her to come. Top comment says Fatima is allowed to practice her religion but has no right to project her beliefs onto other people. I agree, but it was more of OP doing it. Am I the asshole for not driving an hour to bring my brother a bottle of my pee for a drug test? So my brother, 19 male, is a college athlete, and a few days ago he found out they were doing a drug test on the whole team, and he was of course selected. So he asked me if I could bring him a bottle of my pee because I'm the only person he knows that doesn't smoke or do any drugs. Also, I'm the only person he could trust that wouldn't report him. He's an hour away and I had other things to do that day and I knew he'd figure something out anyway. So I told him no and he got mad at me and said I'm a bad sister and only thinking about myself. He did figure it out but is mad at me for putting his career potentially at risk.
Am I wrong for refusing to tell my husband the gender of our baby after he skipped going to the appointment with me? My husband and I are expecting. This is our first baby and we're excited. Thing is, he barely attends any doctor appointments with me and his excuses aren't even valid. He's willing to miss the doctor appointment over soccer or a drink or board game with friends. His response is always, I'm not the one carrying the baby. Why do I have to go to the doctor with you? Regardless if you're carrying the baby or not, you're still the baby's father, right? Duh. He texted me asking me to tell him the results, boy or girl, but I refused to tell him. He kept spam calling me, but I hung up each time. He came home fuming and demanding I tell him the results, but I refused and bluntly told him that since he refused to attend the appointment, then he gets no results until the baby's born, and I said I was willing to die on this hill. You know what? I wish I could be that strong, but I can never keep stuff to myself, and I feel like I would blurt it out by accident or on purpose. He said he's the father and has a right to know. He also has the right and the responsibility as the baby's father to be taking the baby's mother to her appointments. He then called me dramatic since I wasn't alone and my mom was with me. I said he gets no results, period. I just want to mention that my husband just attempted to contact my doctor to get the results. It didn't go well and we had another argument over it. He couldn't get it since his mom was the one who made the call. I'm curious, can the dad call and find out that information? I think not, right? I feel like that's illegal.
I'm 26 and my husband, 29, is obsessed with my boss, 38, and it's all my fault. I started this job about 1.5 years ago. The moment I started, I felt like I was in the right place. My boss, the owner of the company, is very cool and kind. She's self-made and loves her job. She does a lot of dirty work herself that bosses who have 30 to 35 employees wouldn't have to do. But she just loves it. On top of that, we have a 6-hour workday. Our salaries are 20% higher than the market, and we have 7 paid vacations a year. I was so proud of working with a woman like her, so I wouldn't shut up talking about her to my husband, especially in the beginning. My husband was as fascinated with her as I am, until he met her in a company party last Christmas. She must have been beautiful when she was young. She could have been a model. I think his fascination became a crush or an obsession or maybe worse, love. Now he follows her on SM. Her accounts are private, but he stalks her with my account. He also follows the company IG and likes every picture that she's in. He asks about her all the time. She's a very private person, but when her divorce from her ex-husband was finalized in the beginning of this year, we all found out because he started showing up to work. He owned half of our company now, and he started to try and make changes in our work hours and salaries. We found out that her husband had cheated on her with a younger girl who he also tried to employ in our company. She still works with us. She, probably lawyers involved, eventually convinced her husband to sell her back his share. We're still in the process now. My husband has followed all of this and he was so sad for her and so angry. How could anyone do this when they had a woman like her? If it was him, he would cherish her, love her, blah, blah, blah. Who leaves a woman for a girl? I got very angry and told him that all men prefer younger women if they could choose. He laughed at me and told me that only losers do that. The last drop was last Friday. We were out for a movie night when we saw my boss with a young man. He looked in his mid-20s. My husband lost it. He didn't know that she dated younger men. He wanted us to go and say hello, but I refused and yelled at him to control himself because he looked pathetic. When we got home, he was frantically going through her SM until he found the guy and he sighed in relief. The guy was her nephew, and we didn't see the whole company, but they were out with other family members. My husband was so happy like a weight was lifted off his chest. I lost it on him. I started crying and yelling and told him that he was in love with her, and he was shocked when I pushed and kicked him out of the bedroom. I locked the door. He stood outside trying to calm me down, telling me that he loved me and I'm his girl and always will be. Then he said something that ruined me even further. It's not like someone like her would look at me anyway. I haven't slept since. Why is he feeling like this? Is it love? Infatuation? She's too old for my husband, so what is it? And why would he think that he couldn't have her? He's very handsome and still young. And does he mean that I'm less than her to accept him? Or is it purely money and status? He refuses to admit anything. And what can I do now? I love this job. I love the benefits. Thanks to this job, our life has improved and we can afford more than just the necessities. I'm starting to hate my boss though, and I hate myself for idolizing her in front of my husband. Part 2. My husband is obsessed with my boss and it's my fault. I just found out that my husband, separated, is dating my boss. I don't know what to do. I went against my family and friends and asked my husband for a separation. I felt like my heart couldn't take it anymore. My intuition told me that my husband wasn't all mine. This was shortly after the event at the movies. My husband was in total confusion. He said that I was making a mistake and making a mountain out of a molehill, but he moved in with his brother. We decided to start couples counseling too. It went well the first 3 weeks or so, but my husband became more and more reluctant to partake participate, and sometimes he just canceled on me last second. He stopped showing up this month, and also he stopped calling and texting me. I was even more heartbroken, but it just solidified that my intuition was right and that I was doing the right thing, seeing that he was not interested in working on us anymore. I chose not to quit my job. I still loved it with all my heartbreak, and I really needed the benefits. Like, I'm the only one I know who is having 3 weeks paid vacation around Christmas and New Year. I never see my boss anyway, and she doesn't even know of my existence. My husband eventually stopped being active on Instagram, and I thought it was normal. And I thought it was normal because we were going through adversities. Until yesterday, when his brother shared my husband's stories of the night. My husband was in a restaurant holding a woman's hand. I could only see her hand. So my husband has just blocked me and my family and my friends from seeing his updates. I commented, "What the fuck?" And this morning my husband called me. For the first time in a month, totally scared, and started begging, "Please don't ruin this for me. Please don't ruin this for me." I told him, "What do you mean?" He said, "Don't tell her about us." I never made the connection at first. It never even crossed my mind. That woman in the picture was my boss. I started crying and screaming at him. "How could you do this to me? How could you tell me that it was all my head when it's obviously all over your Instagram?" He said it just happened. I dumped him and he was single, and it just happened to find her on Bumble. He begged me not to ruin this for him. She knows he's in the process of divorce, but doesn't know that he already knew who she was or that she was the boss of his soon-to-be ex. They've been seeing each other for about 6 weeks. About 2 weeks after I asked him to move, and it's getting serious. He begged for a good 5 minutes, telling me how he hasn't been this happy all of his life and that I shouldn't ruin his happiness since, again, I was the one who ended our marriage. I've been crying since this morning. I don't know what to do. I want to ruin him and his happiness, but I don't know if I have any right to do that, and I'm so worried about losing my job. Please help.